Yeah, cool. Okay, Cathal, thank you so much for jumping onto the security space. Today, what we will be discussing is very similar to the episode that I recorded a few weeks ago with Milda, how sort of Milda obviously, training Krav Maga and how that's very similar to sort of incident response. And obviously, Cathal, you have a similar background as well. So what we'll be discussing today is the similarities between mixed martial arts and information security, but then also going a little bit, taking a trip in time, a little bit about the background of information security, where that sort of comes from. But before we get into it, are you right just to give us a quick introduction to yourself, if that's okay?
Sure. Hi, Nick. Good to see you again. I like the name of the podcast, by the way. I just noticed now, Space Podcast. It's like shooting off into space. It's great. Yes, so my name's Cathal Judge. I'm the founder of Ciso Assurance Global. It's a cybersecurity company. It's information security and data privacy as well. So we cover pretty much consulting services ranging from the high-level strategic virtual CISO, virtual DPO, going into the tactical kind of governance, risk and compliance, security architecture, mid-level services like risk assessments and so on, and then the operational side, the pen testing and so on. So that's what our company does.
Okay, perfect. So obviously, talk to me a little bit about your martial arts background, because like the episode with Milda, which I will sort of refer to a little bit in the background, is you also have a background in this area, and there seems to be a lot of similarities, not just mixed martial arts, but sports in general with cybersecurity. So talk to me a little bit about your background in the martial arts area.
Sure. So I think my journey for information security started probably at the age of 7. When people ask me, when did I get into security? I think about it on a slightly deeper level. When did I start to learn about the principles, the basic, components that make up information security, which is attack and defend? It's the same kinds of principles you get in the wild, in nature, where you have the hunter and the hunted. It's basic survival at the end of the day. It's just transferred into the digital realm now with cybersecurity. So where did I sort of come across these principles? I think it started when I was about 7 years old, starting out with judo. Obviously, martial arts are all about self-defense first, and that's kind of the ethos that we carry with our business as well. Self-defense meaning all of the defending against the bad guys, the hackers, and so on. But in order to defend against the hackers, you have to also know how to pretend you're a hacker in a way, right? That's like sparring in martial arts. So in judo, we did a lot of training, we went through the techniques and so on, but you had to put it into practice as well. So you do that through sparring, through competing. So by doing so, you learn about those kinds of principles about defense in depth. You start from range, you get closer and you get closer, and you get into different different situations. You have to apply different techniques in order to get to the end goal, which is in judo to pin your opponents on their back for 30 seconds, for example. So learning about those principles started from the age of 7. I went through the different ranks. I learned about levels. So there's levels to this game, same as everything in life, really. And then after I reached a certain level, I got up to brown belt. I couldn't really progress because I was too young to get to black belt. I needed to be 16. So I pivoted into a different martial art, which is Kung Fu. Started doing that from the age of 12 all the way up to around 21. And I think the lesson I learned there is that you get diminishing returns after a while, and sometimes you need to pivot, keep the same principles, but pivot and apply them in a different way, and start to make progress on a different ladder, effectively. And it's the same again in cybersecurity. You have these different pillars of security where you have to, implement certain controls and try and build up a security posture. And then sometimes, that if you focus too much on one area, another area where you lack can become the weakest link in the chain. And overall, you have to have a balanced approach to your security program. So it's the same with martial arts, the same with life in general, I think.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And it's maybe sort of, I don't know, 5, 10 years ago, you could you kind of had security. It used to be black and white, and you had your GRC people, you had your compliance people in one corner, and you had your technical people in another. But that's not the case anymore. You need to sort of have that understanding of both sides in order to sort of successfully climb the ladder these days. Just because it is getting a more and more sort of competitive sector, which is a good thing. So
Yeah.
what I
Absolutely.
wanted to kind of talk about is obviously, we when we were sort of planning this, we kind of wanted to go a little bit about, okay, where did all this come from? This competitive nature of security, and it goes back, much further than before you and I were around.
Yes.
So take me on a trip through time. Where did this all come from? This competitive nature of cyber.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because I tend to look at the principles behind things. Like in the world of security, there are these fundamental principles. Secrecy is at the heart of security because security implies three things really. It implies that if I want to send you a message, I want to make sure that the message gets to you in the first place, so it's available to you. And then at the same time, I want to make sure that the message isn't intercepted by somebody else if I want to keep that communication private. So we don't want someone in the middle to sort of get their hands on the message and read it and then pass it on to you. So that's confidentiality. We want to make sure that the message remains confidential. And equally, we don't want someone in the middle to take the message, modify it, change the integrity of the contents of that message or that letter, and then hand it on to you. So the birthplace of information security, I think, goes as far back as people have been telling secrets. Now, how far does that go? I don't know. But in terms of recorded history, we have, for example, the Caesar cipher. I think that's one of the first known military use cases of cryptography, where Caesar would send messages to his generals and he would shift the letters three to the right in the Roman alphabet or some. And if those messages were to be intercepted, it would be difficult for someone to kind of understand what those commands were. I know that the ancient Egyptians used cryptography many thousands of years ago as well. So there's lots of examples, but I think in the modern time, what we're seeing now is effectively that's those same principles coming into the digital landscape, into technology. And we're trying to implement different technologies and solutions to make it more and more robust and more secure. So cryptography is effectively evolving over the ages. And at the same time, of course, the attackers are evolving, right? The hunters and the hunted. So
Yeah.
evolution on both sides of the fence continuously grows, and it's a cat and mouse game. It just continues like that. Something I discovered more recently, though, which I found really fascinating when it comes to quantum cryptography, so going all the way up to cutting edge today, quantum cryptography is built into the very fabric of the universe. So what I mean by that is if we use quantum computers to encrypt a message and send it, at that level, you can always detect if that message has been tampered with on a quantum level. And it's impossible to hack, to break a system of quantum cryptography without alerting the sender and the receiver at a fundamental level. So the moment that happens, the moment that message chain has been compromised, you can drop that communication and reestablish, create new keys and reestablish that connection immediately. So what I found really fascinating is this cat and mouse game seems to
Mm.
have an end. It seems to have a point at which, on a quantum level, at least as far as we know today, on a quantum level, secrecy is built into the very fabric of the universe itself, which I found fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, because like my next question might open this back up in the sense of like, um, we obviously we're constantly evolving. Whether that's in sport, the 100-meter time, it'll always get sort of. Well, you think it'll always get faster and faster. Someone was like, "Oh, we'll never break 10 seconds at one point," and now I don't follow athletics much, but Bolt got what 9.3747, something like that. Um,
Right.
and it's the same in every sport. It just gets more and more sophisticated. Like I remember, like I was scrolling on Twitter like the other day, and I was watching like I think it was like 1970s Brazil, which is meant to be this really famous team. And like I was watching the video, and it was like this unclipped version in color, and someone edited it, not edited it, but like quote tweeted it and says like if they played in today's football, like they'd be like championship level. And you know what? I was watching, I was like, yeah, actually, I know it's got like greats like Zico, Carlos Alberto, but like what I'm trying to say is. Through the ages, we're constantly progressing naturally because that's human evolution.
Yeah.
So bring this back into cyber. What is surely we're not at the pinnacle yet. Surely it's just going to get more and more
Yeah.
advanced, and we're on the cusp of it, obviously, with this AI explosion. So, what's your view on you mentioned quantum encryption there? How's sort of AI going to affect that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We had a CISO roundtable recently, CISO, I should say. That's the more. common way of saying it, CISO roundtable, where we debated quantum cryptography and AI as well. I was also watching Michio Kaku. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, talking about he's one of these quantum physicists talking about quantum computers and yeah, so AI is a very interesting space. I think when it comes to cryptography, AI, the impacts of AI on cryptography, maybe not necessarily a huge one in terms of so supercomputers will have the capacity to break all existing encryption because they can compute numbers at huge scale, unimaginably large scale. So if we have, for example, 256 AES, which is sort of cutting edge 512 AES today, those quantum computers can break that encryption quite easily. So it's going to shift the whole landscape. Everything that we know today, the world as we know it today, in terms of all secure communications, can be, in theory, broken by quantum computers. But then you get quantum cryptography, right? So that was kind of the point where I was getting to in my mind. What will happen to the world when quantum computers come out and they can break normal encryption? Are we going to go to chaos? Not necessarily, because we have quantum encryption, fortunately, coming along. When it comes to AI, I think AI's impact on security landscape is enormous. It's a case of scaling up, really. So, we saw this a little bit with tools like Kali Linux 2.0. That's the operating system for hacking. So everything became simplified, centralized, like a Swiss Army knife of tons of different hacks in one place. So it becomes easier and easier for the hackers. Now, with the advent of AI can write code immediately. It can spit out code in Python, for example, which is the sort of classical hacking language of choice. So AI will accelerate the threat landscape on a big scale, I think. And then you have AI on the defensive side as well. So every technology is effectively a double-edged sword, right? So you have AI for attacking and then AI for defending. It's just that natural next evolutionary step, I think. So just like you're saying about incremental gains in sport, I think AI is effectively incremental gains getting to the point of diminishing returns, and now it's like a big pivot. Suddenly there's a new thing, it's AI, and suddenly there's going to be a new new arms race.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. No, definitely. So talk to me more on a practical level then. So obviously, what are some of the biggest challenges that organizations today are actually facing them?
Yeah. Well, I think AI is one of them, definitely. Building on that, I think there's a lot of new threats, threat actors or threat vectors and so on, due to AI. And at the same time, lots of defensive solutions coming out also utilizing AI, machine learning, big data analytics, all of that comes into it. I think what we're dealing with a lot in terms of our current work, as things are today, we're doing a lot of work around key management, encryption key management, privacy in the cloud, where we have those encryption algorithms working hard and making sure all of the customer data is secure and so on. But the key management part of it is more like compliance between different countries. When you have local GDPR, local privacy laws in Europe applying, and then you have the US laws and these laws and those laws, it gets quite complicated. So a lot of the things we're working on today are around ensuring that encryption solutions are robust and secure, and they're also compliant with privacy laws across the globe.
Yep. Okay.
So that's very much our security architecture services. Talking about Fortune 500s, the kind of large corporations that have complex networks, lots of data, lots of network systems. So that's a lot of our focus at the moment.
Yeah, and obviously you yourself, you work in Europe as well, Cathal. So obviously, what is like the current security landscape looking like in Europe as opposed to, I'm going to compare it to the UK, for example, because that's obviously where I'm based and where a lot of the people who will watch this podcast are based. So what's like the security landscape and what's the comparison between the two?
It's an interesting question. I'll try to be political with my answer. So I would say, having worked a lot in the UK and in Germany as well, and having traveled across Europe a lot, I have a decent amount of exposure. I think the EU in general, when the UK was part of the EU, under GDPR, that was really setting the bar in terms of privacy, legal legislation, that's really at the cutting edge, and that's at the forefront of, I would say, privacy legislation globally. Other countries are starting to catch up. Let's say, like in the US, they recently passed privacy laws, and different countries are all bringing up their privacy game, so to speak. In terms of cybersecurity, I think the maturity in the UK is very high. I see a lot of movement in terms of talents. Let's say there's a lot of good talent in the UK, a lot of excellent consultants and so on. A lot of our consultants come from the UK for that reason. What I've seen is in Europe there is less supply in terms of top talent, the same level of demand, especially in Germany, and that's why we aim to sort of to address those needs. So a lot of our consultants have come from the UK, and then we consult across Europe to meet those demands. In terms of maturity overall, I think it's hard to say which countries are the most mature in terms of security solutions and all of that, but I would say UK is definitely one of the leading ones. Germany's one of the leading ones. I think Spain, France, Italy come to mind as well. Netherlands.
Got to be on the way, haven't they?
Sorry, say again?
You think Israel's on the way as well?
Oh yeah, Israel as well.
Yeah.
I was just focusing on EU, but yes.
Yeah, sorry,
definitely.
yeah. No, whenever I can kind of get Israel into a conversation, just because, like
there's a huge amount of tech startups in Israel. Yeah, we've got customers that come from Israel, and there's lots of tech startups and lots of innovation happening in Israel. I think it's a great one of the leading countries, definitely, when it comes to cybersecurity. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. So obviously, how much of it is it really about when we're talking about governments? How much of it really is about privacy? How could this be down to governments wanting sort of just control everyone?
Yeah.
Where do you kind of draw the line on that sort of governments kind of pulling the strings?
Sure. So I think it's a controversial topic, of course, to talk about privacy as more than a human right, right? So fundamentally, privacy is a human right, and that's why we work. That's why I work in that space. I like to know that the work that I'm doing has a positive impact on the world. So digital privacy is a basic human right, and I think that's a wonderful thing. I think at the same time, you also have interesting laws about governments requiring access to personal data. Personally, I think it's okay when there's a specific case to be investigated, then that's fine. But you get programs of mass surveillance, Edward Snowden and so on. These people like that have sort of revealed these things over time. So there is a point at which governments exceed what they should be doing. They start to access government data en masse, and so when you see all the different countries having their own privacy laws, and those laws have certain loopholes, or not loopholes, but they allow for local government access. So a lot of countries will have good, robust privacy laws, but they'll have those additional fine text kind of different legal grounds for processing data, actually, and they will allow for certain types of surveillance. But then there's competition as well. So that customer data, all of that personal data, will be protected from certain governments and shared with other governments, and it becomes quite political in that respect. So it's a little bit more than just raw human rights, I think.
Yeah, and obviously, with your experience in security, like when does it start to get sort of, how do you sort of balance the politics when it comes to security? Because like you say, like there's whole arguments around sort of obviously economics. Sometimes the security just doesn't get the budget. But when we're bringing sort of politics into it, it's obviously a fine line with cybersecurity, given the nature of data that is on the line with it. So how do you working in your role manage political situations? And I know it's a difficult question.
Yeah, no, that's fine. For me, it's about customer centricity above all. So what we try to do with our clients is we put our clients' interests at the heart of our own. So what that means is we position ourselves on the client side of the fence. So we're always the independent advisors. We don't try to push technology solutions and licenses and specific products. What we do is we sit on the customer side of the fence, and we develop the 3 to 5 year roadmap, thinking from the customer's perspective always. So, and what does it mean to think from our client's perspective? It means to think about their clients, which are in the end people walking on the streets on a day-to-day basis, people like you and I. Those are the people we serve, really. So that's what I like to sort of focus on. We're trying to protect their personal data, our customers' data, and equally their staff, right? So staff are just as important as customers, because all that personal data is belonging to humans in the end, and our job is to protect that data from bad actors, hackers, and so on. So we're very customer centric in that respect. Wherever our customers happen to be based, obviously those local legislative requirements apply, and we completely work with those authorities to make sure that we're fully compliant with all those requirements, whatever they may be.
Yeah. And out of interest, did you see this recent, this US top secret data leak? Just because, I just wonder what your sort of thoughts are when large data sets are kind of being leaked, and therefore, obviously, there's a lot of sort of sensitive data going out there. What is your opinion on that, and do you think it could have got
Yeah.
avoided?
Could it have been avoided? So that's a tricky question, because that's effectively what we call the insider threats, right? We have a term for that. It's the insider threat. Very difficult to detect. I think there are some preventative measures where you can do background checks before hiring staff, and you can do those kinds of background checks. But once someone becomes an authorized user, once they have access to data, they are authorized, right? So they have that access. So it's very difficult to stop someone who's already authorized from taking data out of an organization, even something like the NSA, even at that top level. The insider threat is very difficult to mitigate. I would say the way to limit the damage is to make sure that individual has limited access to data. In other words, they should only have access to exactly what they need in order to complete their day-to-day job. Now, in this particular case, I don't know all the details behind it, but just looking at the sheer volume of data that was leaked online tells me that the classification scheme, I would question, so if someone joins the NSA, let's say, and they have access to top secret data, does that mean that they have access to the entire category? And if so, isn't that excessive? Shouldn't it only be based on their specific role, what we call role-based access control, specific bits of data? So I get the feeling the access was far more than it needed to be, and therefore the impact of that data breach was much bigger than it should have been. Could they have prevented that? Difficult to say. It's the background checks, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's a tough
no,
one.
exactly. Whenever there's an incident, you look at, like, could this have been avoided? But in reality, look, no one's 100% safe on this. So,
No, there's
you know,
no such thing as 100% safe, unfortunately.
yeah, exactly. So obviously, everything that you kind of shared for us, I just kind of wanted to summarize in the sense of, all these, warnings. Is this the reasons as to why you started your consultancy? You've seen all these sort of problems, and that's why you decided to go by yourself. Was that the reason?
It is. It's one of the reasons. So I always try to have a positive impact on the world, in anything I do. So I think the cybersecurity company and the field that I've landed up in is really a result of my childhood and the direction I've taken, throughout the years. So in a way, it's an expression of who I am on a scale which includes many. We have a wonderful company with lots of amazing people helping us, supporting us, and working together every day. But yeah, so it's effectively like a expression of who I am, in a way, to be in the cybersecurity field from the martial arts background. And in terms of the goals, it's always about customer centricity and trying to do what's right, trying to make sure everything has morals and ethics built into what we do. So it's about building a better tomorrow. It's about helping people. It's about human rights, which is privacy, and helping our customers to enjoy the journey as well.
No, and that's a great point to sort of finish it on, Cathal. So if anybody would like any information on Cathal's consultancy, if they need any assistance, then I'll be sure to get all the contact information into the description bit of this video below. But other than that, Cathal, thank you so much for your time today, mate. You've been a pleasure.
Thank you, Nick. Have a good one. Have a nice weekend.